Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a legendary guest tonight, someone known as the Queen of Hash, Mila Jansen in Amsterdam. I've had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time with Mila over the past few months and a couple years ago. We'll be talking about that and her Dabadoo tours around the world. But first, we have our start of the year hemp news segment. So stay tuned as we bring on the infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
Okay, we're going to count down the 10 most impactful things that happened in 2022 in just a moment, but we have one story to precede that. Cannabis is safe and effective in migraine treatments. According to a new study out of Fairfield, California, the inhalation of cannabis flowers is effective and well tolerated among patients with migraines, according to a systemic review of the literature published in the journal Cure Us. A team of researchers affiliated with the California Institute of Behavioral Neurosciences and Psychology reviewed 9 recent studies involving over 5,600 subjects. They reported, quote, all the studies showed encouraging findings on the therapeutic effects of medicinal marijuana in migraine treatment. Additionally, medical marijuana is well tolerated with fewer side effects and is safe to use in migraine patients, end quote. The authors concluded, quote, the studies demonstrated that medical marijuana has a significant clinical response by reducing the length and frequency of migraines. No severe adverse effects were noted. Due to its effectiveness and convenience, medical marijuana therapy may be helpful for patients suffering from migraines, end quote. Survey data published earlier this year reported that an estimated 1/3 of patients suffering from headache disorders acknowledge using cannabis products for symptom management. The full text of this study, Efficacy and Safety of Medical Marijuana in Migraine Headaches, a Systemic Review, appears in this month's edition of Cure Us. That's one word, Cure Us. Now here's our countdown of the 10 most significant things that happened in marijuana policy in 2022. The 10th most significant thing, Mississippi became the 37th state to legalize medical cannabis access. State lawmakers passed comprehensive legislation in February regulating the production and dispensing of medical cannabis products in Mississippi. The legislation was enacted 15 months after state voters initially passed a similar medical marijuana legalization initiative. However, the courts later struck down the state's initiative process, thus nullifying the 2020 election results. Marijuana access has been long overdue for Mississippi's patients. The overwhelming majority of the voters decided in favor of this policy change 2 years ago, and while lawmakers cannot make up for lost time, they have an obligation to roll out this program as swiftly as possible so that patients can finally access the medicine they need. Number 9, survey of over 90% of pain patients report reducing their opioid intake following medical cannabis. The overwhelming majority of pain patients provided medical cannabis treatment report either reducing or ceasing their use of opioid medications, according to data published in August in the Journal of Addictive Diseases. In our clinical experience, I've seen the same thing. Back to the story. A team of Israeli investigators affiliated with Tel Aviv University assessed the relationship between cannabis and opioids in a cohort of patients with non-cancer specific chronic pain. All of the patients enrolled in the study were prescribed medical cannabis therapy in accordance with Israel's medical cannabis access laws. Among those patients who reported using opioids as a baseline, 93% either decrease or stop using opioids following cannabis initiation, a finding that's consistent with dozens of other studies involving numerous other patient populations. The data is clear and consistent. Cannabis is effective in treating a variety of forms of chronic pain, and for some patients, it provides a viable alternative to potentially deadly opioids. Number 8, analysis. State legal marijuana industry now employs over 428,000 full-time workers. The state licensed cannabis industry added over 100,000 new jobs in 2021 and now employs over 428,000 full-time workers. according to data published and compiled in February by Leafly and Whitney Economics. According to its latest report, the cannabis industry created an average of 280 new jobs per day in 2021. That represents a 33% year-over-year increase, and it marks the fifth year in a row of annual job growth greater than 27%. At a time when the rest of the economy is struggling and people are leaving their jobs in droves, the legal cannabis industry is blooming, showing exponential employment growth and attracting talented and driven individuals from across the workforce. The seventh most significant story of 2021. The President of the United States signed a law facilitating clinical cannabis trials and drug development. President Joe Biden signed legislation into law facilitating the federal approval of cannabis-specific clinical research and drug development. It was the first time in over 50 years that a president has signed a standalone piece of legislation loosening federal marijuana prohibitions. Under the new law, the United States Attorney General is provided with a 60-day timeline to either approve or deny applications from scientists wishing to conduct clinical trials involving the use of cannabis by human subjects. Law also mandates that the U.S. Attorney General to solicit applications from those seeking to grow cannabis for either research purposes or for potential drug development, and it provides a timeline for the Attorney General to approve those applications. It also calls upon federal agencies, including HHS, to provide a report on, quote, potential therapeutic effects of cannabidiol or marijuana on serious medical conditions, end quote. While the significance of the President of the United States signing the first standalone cannabis policy reform bill should not be overlooked, in truth, we don't need more research to know definitively that prohibition is a misguided and disastrous policy. That said, the legislation is certainly a step in the right direction that shows there can be bipartisan cooperation on the cannabis issue. With advocates facing a divided Congress in 2023, virtually any effort to advance cannabis-specific reform legislation would require bipartisan support. Number 6, the FBI failed to provide comprehensive marijuana arrest figures for the first time. Data provided in October by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation reported that in 2021, over 400,000 drug-related seizures involved cannabis. However, for the first time in decades, the agency failed to provide national estimates regarding the number of people arrested for marijuana-related violations. Data previously provided by the FBI has allowed activists to track yearly marijuana-related arrests since 1965, at a time when voters and their elected officials nationwide are reevaluating state and federal marijuana policies. It's inconceivable that government agencies are unable to produce any explicit data on the estimated cost and scope of marijuana prohibition in America. Number 5, a historic percentage of Americans say cannabis should be legalized. The percentage of Americans who support adult use cannabis legalization remains at record highs. National data surveyed and compiled by Data for Progress reported that 74% of likely voters now support ending the federal ban on marijuana. For the third consecutive year, polling data compiled by the Gallup organization found that 68% of U.S. adults say that the use of marijuana should be legal. Separate polls released this year by Fox News, Monmouth University, YouGov, Politico, and several others similarly reported that most Americans back legalizing cannabis. There's no buyer's remorse on the part of the American people. In an era of state-level legalization, voter support for this issue has grown rapidly, an indication that these policy changes have been successful and are comporting with voters' desires and expectations. Number 4, more lawmakers enact workplace protection for cannabis consumers, something we need here in Oregon. State lawmakers adopted numerous laws in 2022 limiting employers' ability to either fire or refuse to hire employees based solely on their off-the-job marijuana use. Specifically, lawmakers in California, the District of Columbia, and Rhode Island prohibited employers from discriminating against workers who test positive for THC metabolites on a drug test, while protections for patients were enacted in several other states, Louisiana, Missouri, and Utah. In total, 8 jurisdictions, California, Connecticut, the District of Columbia, Nevada, New Jersey, New York, Montana, and Rhode Island, have enacted statutes limiting employers' ability to hire or fire workers for their recreational cannabis use in certain circumstances, while more than half of medical marijuana access states have enacted similar workplace protections. These decisions reflect today's changing cultural and legal landscape surrounding cannabis. It's time for workplace policies to adapt to this new reality and cease punishing employees for activities they engage in during their off hours that pose no legitimate threat to either workplace safety or productivity. The third most significant story for cannabis reform in 2022. The United States Senate fails to move to the Safe Banking Act. The 117th Congress, which ended earlier this week, adjourned without members of the U.S. Senate holding any hearings or votes on either the Secure and Fair Enforcement or SAFE Banking Act or other significant pieces of marijuana reform legislation. Since 2019, House members have advanced the legislation on 7 separate occasions, 7 times. The Senate companion bill has 42 co-sponsors, including 9 Republicans. It's unfortunate that Congress and members of the U.S. Senate specifically failed to take this opportunity to affirm the legitimacy of state legal marijuana markets and instead acted in a way that will continue to deny this emerging legal industry access to basic financial tools and services, like bank accounts. Until congressional action is taken, state licensed marijuana businesses, the hundreds and thousands of people they employ, and the millions of Americans that patronize them will continue to be at a higher risk of robbery due to the cash-heavy nature of this industry created by outdated federal laws. Furthermore, small entrepreneurs who seek to enter this industry will continue to struggle to compete against larger, more well-capitalized interests. Prior to the 2020 election, Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader, pledged on multiple occasions that he would prioritize bringing legislation to repeal the criminalization of cannabis to a floor vote, but that never happened. The second most significant story for cannabis reform in 2022, tens of thousands of Americans received marijuana-specific pardons and expungements. The President of the United States and several state officials issued mass pardons and expungements in 2022 to those with prior low-level cannabis convictions. In October, President Joe Biden granted pardons to over 6,500 people with federal marijuana possession convictions. In Connecticut, Colorado, Oregon, and elsewhere, officials issued over 100,000 marijuana-related pardons and expungements. To date, 24 states have enacted legislation explicitly facilitating the expungement of prior marijuana-specific convictions. As a result of these laws, 2 million Americans have had their cannabis-related convictions set aside in recent years. Hundreds of thousands of Americans unduly carry the burden and stigma of a past conviction for behavior that most Americans and a growing number of states no longer consider a crime. Our sense of justice and our principles of fairness demand that public officials and the courts move swiftly to right the past wrongs of cannabis prohibition and criminalization. And now, number 1, the most significant cannabis story from 2021. 3 more states enacted adult use legalization laws. Voters and lawmakers in 3 more states, Maryland, Missouri, and Rhode Island, enacted laws in 2022 legalizing adult use marijuana possession and regulating retail cannabis markets. Voters in Missouri voted in favor of a constitutional amendment, while Maryland voters approved the legislative referendum. Rhode Island's law was enacted by the legislature. In total, 21 states, comprising nearly 1/2 of the U.S. population, have now adopted laws regulating adult use marijuana production and retail sales. We've achieved numerous significant legislative victories in 2022 as more lawmakers recognize that advocating for marijuana policy reform is a political opportunity and not a political liability. We anticipate future legislative gains in 2023 and beyond. In fact, in March, the state of Oklahoma will vote in an election to legalize marijuana, where that will be the only thing on the ballot. So we think Oklahoma will certainly be legalizing early this year. If you or a loved one are looking for a physician who can help you obtain a medical marijuana permit in Oregon, Washington, or anywhere else in the United States, then give us a call. We have a referral line. Call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. We had a lot of exciting breakthroughs in 2022, and it looks like 2023 will provide even more. So stay tuned as we bring you the hemp news most weeks here throughout the year. We're going to start now with our guest, Mila Jansen, the founder of the Pollinator machine to make hash in Amsterdam and the founder of the Dabadoo Tour. And just stay tuned and help us restore hemp. Good night.
I would like to introduce a friend in Holland, in Amsterdam, known as the Hash Queen, Mila Jansen. Mila is the founder of a huge business, the Pollinator business, making hash machines, and a longtime activist. Welcome to Cannabis Common Sense, Mila. So,
Zij praat met je. Yeah, I didn't hear the last sentence. So welcome to
Cannabis Common Sense.
Okay.
Great, nice. Welcome. Wonderful to be here.
I couldn't understand the last sentence.
Okay.
You
Can
see
you
it.
het wat harder doen?
Mila has a daughter there who's her tech assistant, Mila and I just spent some time in Colombia and Peru, but you spent a lot of time traveling all over Latin America in the Dabadoo competitions. And so that's where I've met you a couple times down in Colombia, and we got to spend quite a bit of time together in Peru.
Yeah.
But I understand, Mila, that before you started, and you're in Europe, it's different than America because what you're smoking is tobacco and hash together, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Malus,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mila's daughter and technical assistant. But tell me how you were an activist first before you got into the cannabis scene, weren't you? You want to talk about your early career?
That was a long time ago. I started smoking in 1964. And those days, it was illegal in Holland. And
Right.
yeah, we had some demonstrations. And later, of course, there were more because in 68 I disappeared or I hitchhiked to India. And I didn't really return to Amsterdam till 1988. So,
That's a long time.
yeah.
So did you start the pollinator business in 1988? Or when did you start your pollinator business?
No, that took a couple of years. I started 92. Well, actually, 94, we were registered as a company. Yeah.
I tell our audience what a pollinator does.
A pollinator basically separates the trichomes from all the rest of the plant material. And in the pollinator, this is done with a dry sift in a kind of tumbler, and the material just tumbles around and knocks off each other's THC glands or the trichomes, and they fall through the screen to the bottom of the machine where you can collect them.
I see.
First
And so you've been selling those since 92 or 94. So over 30, what is it, 30 years now?
Nearly 28, I think. Yeah.
Tell us about your time in India. You know, I haven't had a chance to pick up and read your book. I hope to get it soon, but I understand you have a great biography out there. What's the title of your biography?
Mila, How I Became the Hash Queen.
I
Uh,
see. Tell us the stories from that book, if you can, please.
I hitchhiked to India with my then 3-year-old daughter. And
Is that Milu's?
yes, and we traveled. Once we got out of India, Europe, we traveled through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, into India and Nepal. And everywhere in all those countries, people were only smoking hash. Nobody was smoking weed anywhere. So since I'd started smoking hash in Amsterdam, because when I started, there was no weed available at all. And you could only score some hash down by the harbor where sailors would have brought it in and maybe sold it to some of the local pubs. And that's where you could score hash. So that's how I started smoking hash. Then all those 20 years in Asia and India, there was only hash smoking. So it wasn't really till 1988 when I returned to Amsterdam that the city was full of coffee shops, all selling weed and hash. But I tried the weed 4 or 5 times, but after having smoked hash only for 20 years, it never really
It
suited.
wasn't the same.
Yeah.
In India and in Asia, were they mixing the hash with tobacco?
Sometimes, or they just smoke it pure in little pipes.
Mm-hmm.
And in the chillums, I think, yeah, I don't know, maybe they added some tobacco. The sadhus in India, the people who smoke a lot of chillums in honor of Shiva.
Uh-huh. So they're like holy monks for Shiva.
Yeah, and they smoke a lot of hash chillums.
Uh-huh. So what did you do? Did you while you were in India all that time, did you do anything in the cannabis realm outside of just scoring for anything you're willing to talk about? Maybe something that was in your book.
I don't know. I started a school while I was there for kids in Goa, and I had a knitting company up in the mountains. But I wasn't really just as a recreational user. I always considered myself a recreational user. I wasn't planning to go in a business to make it and all.
Uh-huh.
But my most wonderful experience smoking hash was with those same sadhus, these holy Shivites, and they told us they would take us up on the mountain and show us their favorite plants. And they did. And their favorite plants were the ones that had somehow, because they were in a little dell and covered with snow during winter, and when the snow melted, they were alive and kept growing. And they turned out into funky little bonsai plants. The woody branches were going all directions, and all the buds were relatively small. But we rubbed those buds, and they made it chillum immediately. And that was the most amazing hash I think I ever smoked. Walking down that mountain, it was nearly I was on acid or something. The colors, the sounds, everything was just so intense. Yeah, that was my most amazing hash smoke.
I understand that cannabis is indigenous to that area and that above the timberline, a lot of it just grows wild up there.
And most of it grows wild up there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the predominant species of plant once you get above the trees. Must be fascinating. I haven't been in that part of the world.
Well, I think you get a lot more benefit from the sun rays at that altitude. What is that? That's in there in the sun at that height. It gets
ultraviolet. You get more ultraviolet, and that does apparently help generate more resin production, right?
Yeah.
So when you went back to Amsterdam, how is it that you came to start your pollinator company?
I came back to Amsterdam. I didn't like the weed. And I also didn't really like the hash they sold there, because that was mainly hash from Morocco. And I was rather spoiled living in India, getting the best Afghani, Nepali, or hand rubbing myself up in Manali. So I didn't really like this.
I understand the Moroccan hash has other things in it a lot of times.
Well, the Moroccans only learned to make hash from the first hippies that came back from the East. They didn't really make hash. I was there in 64, summer of 65, and people smoked keef, and it was black tobacco mixed with little buds chopped up together. It had nothing to do with hash, really. Anyway.
It's not so much that they put things into it, it's that they import the seeds from everywhere else and are losing their own stuff. So nowadays, if you talk about Moroccan, it's all amnesia, or it'll be, it's got all the American names.
Right. So they didn't really make hash there locally. I thought it went back farther than that. So that's
no. So yes, I was getting the hash that came from there, but I didn't like it. But I was also growing weed at that time. I had 4 kids' mouths to feed. They'd always want to eat 3 times a day. So, and it wasn't really looked down on in those days. In fact, I have a lot of the newspaper headings where the police and many of the politicians were for legalization of marijuana as a soft drug. But somehow that never happened. It still hasn't happened. The only thing is now it's tolerated to sell in the coffee shops.
Right, but they have less coffee shops than they used to. They kind of cracked down on a lot of them there in Holland, across the country, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, in Holland, basically the attitude is not really for cannabis so much. Our whole government, we keep choosing the wrong government. And I would rather have lots of tourists come to the Rembrandt exhibition in the Rijksmuseum than go to the coffee shops. And I made the rules quite strict, so it was quite easy to lose your license if you had somebody there of 16 years old. Then they just close your coffee shop.
I understand, and I visited on the border of Germany, the river there, a municipally owned coffee shop that was run by the local government to keep the hard drugs separated from the soft drugs.
Yeah, yeah. That was the whole idea, but later governments also didn't like
Yeah.
having to be available.
So I wonder if those municipal owned or city owned coffee shops are still there. Probably not.
Because I think ultimately each town, each city can more or less, not completely, but more or less decide how many coffee shops they want in their community or not.
Uh-huh. So how did you become the hash queen? How did you get that title?
Oh yeah, we got stuck in that story. At that time, I was growing a lot of weed. And so I had all the trim and small buds, and I'd seen in Asia, of course, how hash was made. So I started off making hash on a flat screen and kind of tumbling the material over the flat screen and take about 20 minutes, half an hour to make a joint. And then one night I'm standing in front of my clothes dryer, the clothes dryer where the clothes are tumbling inside.
Right.
The clothes were doing the same. So the next day we went and got a clothes dryer and removed the heat and just tied a screen around the drum, threw in some material. Yep, all the crystals fell through the screen down to the bottom. So that was the first pollinator. And I don't know, I never called myself Hash Queen, but it was in the High Times a couple of years later, a huge heading. And I'd become the Hash Queen. And it has to do with having invented the first way to separate the crystals so people could make hash small scale at home. Later, I also made the bags because water seemed to be very useful, very icy cold water in
Yeah.
separating. And I
Those-
sewed those first bags on my own sewing machine before getting them produced. And now, of course, lots of people make them. They're not difficult to make. And then came the washing machine. That was my last product that we sell at Pollinator Company. And the washing machine, of course, had been invented to get your dirty clothes clean. And the washing machine considers the trichomes as dirt. So it'll wash those plants and wash off those trichomes. And it's an expert. It was invented to do that. So it does a very good job. And then in the runoff water, you can catch those trichomes in different screen bags.
Uh-huh.
And difference between the dry sift and the water and ice sift. The dry sift is people who really want a lot of flavor and aroma when they smoke the hash. They should use the dry sift. The isolator and bubbleator, both made with water and ice, some have less taste and flavor, but they're goddamn stronger. So I must say I prefer that.
You prefer the ice hash because it's
Yes.
strong.
Yeah.
I see.
Very clean also when you smoke it. Yeah.
Well, it's been in the washing machine, so of course
Yeah.
it's gonna be,
Yeah.
but it's the dirt, so that's counterintuitive. So, um, how many of those have you sold? I know I've seen you've got a wide variety of them. You've got little ones, you've got mediums, you've got 'em that are like 10 feet. What's your biggest one?
Yeah, that's the 10 feet one.
10
Uh,
foot or
Storage,
3 meters or something?
so long as you got someone to shovel it in, it'll keep turning.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Neat, neat. So, do you export those much?
Yeah, in my book, I have a map of where they all go. I'll
I
try
see.
to find it and see if I can show it, if you can see it at all on the camera. And here, can you see anything of that?
Yeah. There's a lot of them in Japan and
Yeah,
New Zealand.
yeah,
Okay. And of course, America.
and American, yeah,
Canada.
Europe, Canada. Anyway, so they go all over the place. And just now we were down in South America with the Dabadoo tour of 1922. We had Dabadoos in 7 different countries. And I really liked that because I noticed that if we were having a Dabadoo in Brazil, there'd be some people there from Chile or from Peru. And if we were in Peru, there'd be people from Brazil and Uruguay and Colombia. And like that, it seemed to be a whole coming together of hash enthusiasts in South America. And I think a lot of friendships were made and a lot of information was shared. And I think some businesses got together and started selling in other countries in South America than just in their own country. So I really like that, to bring hash people together in the world.
Yeah. When did you first do a Dabadoo?
Oh, that was in 2013. And
So
I,
almost 9 or 10 years now.
yeah, and it was just going to be a one-time thing. We were just going to have a birthday. It was my 69th birthday, and I wanted to do something special. So we did a Dabadoo. But the people who were there, everybody loved it so much. 4 months later, we had one in Barcelona. And I think now we're well into the mid 30s altogether of how many we've done.
That's neat. So when did you start doing them outside of Europe? And for people who don't know, maybe I should say a Dabadoo is like a competition kind of. You grade the the hash and the extracts, and you test it, and you say which one you think's the best, right? And it's a group decision, and you give out awards.
Yeah, because everybody is a judge in my picture. I don't like these competitions that you just have 5 super judges that make all the decisions. I
Uh-huh.
think basically, whether you've done it often or not, you know which one you like, and that one you give the points. Yeah.
Right, right. So uh you just got back from your one from 2022 in 7 countries in Latin America. Did you do any in Europe this year? Or didn't you do one somewhere in America too?
No, this May, I think there's some coming. I'm going to come to America.
Really? Where are you going to come?
I think there's one planned in New England, in Michigan, and maybe in San Diego with our communal friends.
Oh yeah, yeah. I we'll see what they do with that.
Yeah.
San Diego is one of the most conservative cities in California, so
Okay.
hopefully that'll work out well.
Yeah.
See how that goes. So, how is it that you started going to South America? You had people that came to, and obviously I came to a couple of them here.
Yeah.
So you have Americans there as well. But
Uh,
what?
my first South American customer phoned me in 1998, and he said, "I'm calling you from Medellin, and I want the biggest pollinator you can ship me." So I
Uh-huh.
said, "Okay, I need a credit card and an address." And actually, within 5 minutes, he phoned back. I had credit card and address, and that was the first one that went to Gato.
Colombia.
And in the end, they moved all over South America. So then they'd need machines in Peru. Then they'd need them in different countries. Anyway, and I think I had my first Abadoo in 2016 in Uruguay. And
Oh,
goodness knows how I ended up there and why.
I know you just go where they want to set them up. You don't actively try to, hey, I want to have one in Uruguay. It's people in Uruguay say we want you to come to Uruguay, or people in Colombia say we want you to come to Colombia. So
Just remembered why I was in Uruguay, because we had an appointment with a few people to talk with the government about legalization. This was about 10 years ago. And then it actually happened. So this year, actually, I was quite disappointed that now coming to Uruguay and doing a dabadoo there and thinking, oh, wow, it's going to be great. It was always so free before. No, nothing like that. My best friend was sitting in jail. I had to go and visit him there. And the atmosphere was, they changed the government, and the new government had done away with all this legalization business. I think the only place you could get it was in a pharmacy.
yeah, and they limit the THC content, I think, in the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Unless you're a member of a co-op that can be up to 100 patients. But I know they've closed some of those down. And our
Yeah.
friend Lupo's
But
store,
that seemed to be more active in Argentina, where we met groups like that, and they could have 250 patients each, and that seemed to be functioning. Yeah.
that's a newer thing. Argentina's only been doing it about a year, where Uruguay, they pushed the bubble back in, it was about 2015 or 16,
Yeah.
when I guess 14 or 15 when they first legalized
Yeah. Yeah.
there, theoretically, but it's not real legalization. It's like you said.
Yeah. 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 That's why I'm curious how things are going to be going in Thailand. It seems to, so far, everything's to be going very well there.
Yeah, well, like maybe our audience doesn't. I left being with you in Medellin, Colombia, and went directly to Bangkok, Thailand, to
Yeah.
the Asia International Hemp Expo and the second Hemp Environmental Forum. And so I was amazed that cannabis seems to be more legal there than anywhere else in the world. There are stores everywhere, but the cannabis is very expensive in those stores. I think most people still, if they're buying cannabis, most local people buy it from people they know rather than in those expensive stores.
Yeah, but they also been handing out 1 million clones. I'm
Yeah,
still quite sure if they were all hemp or if they were actually marijuana to smoke. But that actually really happened. And so,
they gave 1 million plants one at a time to 1 million different people. It
yeah,
is fascinating. So it's wide open. So we
my
got,
friend's married to a Thai wife, and she actually got 4 plants when she went to the village that day.
okay, okay. Well, that's better than one. That'll
Yeah,
get you going.
yeah,
But I don't think the quality is that great. But I can't say I didn't really see them.
yeah,
But definitely have some good cannabis there in Thailand, and things are opening up there. They have government support for legalization too. I guess in Thailand, the royal family is very influential and highly regarded, and they've been pushing it. It became because some members of the royal family really pushed for that.
yeah, yeah. No, it's fantastic. And I think that's what it needs, the backing of governments. And that's why at the moment, most places where they say it's been legalized, they all still seem to have a lot of problems. Well, then, of course, I'm thinking about Uruguay. But
Yeah, Uruguay seems to be everyone thought they were back in 2013 and 14,
yeah,
on the cutting edge, but the way they've legalized it through pharmacies and how they're cracking down now on our friend Lupo and others,
yeah,
it seems like it's invited corruption of some sort, I think.
yeah,
You know.
probably, yeah, yeah.
So tell us about your dabadoos this year. So you went first to Uruguay and then to Argentina.
We started off in Brazil.
Ah, okay.
And
Kind of open. It wasn't, or did you have to hide more?
no,
Hide, yes.
yeah. Well,
wasn't even
basically,
called
in
a
every
dabadoo.
country, you have to hide a bit.
Yeah, but they
Yeah.
didn't call it a dabadoo. They didn't
No, they were
scare.
doing it as if we were just doing book signings. Because one of the things they've done, they translated my whole book into Portuguese and had it there. So we did Portuguese book signings.
Oh, there's a Portuguese version. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have bought one from you, only they were in Spanish and Portuguese. I missed your English one. Next time.
Send me your address and I'll send you an English one.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll do that.
Yeah.
So you're at home now. It's the holidays. You think you're coming to America sometime, to several places. That would be fascinating. Do you have any other dabadoos planned before that?
In Barcelona, of course, during Cannabis.
Uh-huh. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I'll see you there. We'll see.
Our Dabadoo will be on the 6th due to lack of time and space and I don't know,
So
problems.
that's the 6th of March?
Huh?
Is it 6th of March or
Yeah.
April? 6th of March.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So,
See you there.
yeah, I hope so. We'll see. I'm not sure at this point. We'll have
Okay.
to find out. But I'm sure we'll run into each other somewhere along the way. Are you going to do any more in South America next year?
I don't know. They're all hoping I will, but I have to tell them it also depends on my health. I had my 78th birthday in Colombia this year. And yeah, it's not like I'm a spring chicken anymore. So I just want to see next year. And maybe the time of year that we went wasn't the best time because we were there traveling around between September and December. So in my mind, that would be spring and beginning of summer. But everywhere it was goddamn cold till the last 2 weeks we were there from just in the month December. But wherever we were, it was chilly.
Really? Well, you were there before it really warmed up then for
Yeah.
their summer.
Next time, maybe just start going there in January or something, and then see what happens. Anyway, that's
Well,
it.
that'll put it in 2024.
Yes, that would put it 24.
How is your health? Are you doing with your trip where you seem to be going really well? And I know we went up to some really high altitudes in Peru. I think at the highest we went up to 16 or 17,000 feet. And that's hard on anybody, I know.
Yeah, I also didn't go with you guys then, right to the top of that ridge.
But you got pretty close. You got pretty close. But yeah, there was some motorcycles. I know Milou's, your daughter, went all the way up there. She made a lot of good photos.
Yes.
And then we went to Machu Picchu together. You hiked around that way. You were way in front of me. I know that. I had to stop and gasp for air as I was going along.
I found it a bit, yeah, I don't know. I had different hopes of Machu Picchu. It was just too crowded with people for my liking.
Yeah, yeah. And the mosquitoes were pretty bad too.
Yeah. Oh, those little black things. Terrible.
Yeah, I
But
got.
what for me was very impressive was that you'd been traveling through a mountain range where mountains pretty much is in any mountain range. And then suddenly you come to this spot, and I didn't even count them exactly, but there's 4 or 5 of these spheric like mountains with steep sides and a little rounded top that didn't look like any normal mountain anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
I fully understand why these Aztecs arrived there and thought, whoa, that is the place. Up those mountains, they're special. I know if those mountains had stood in India, they would have been declared holy thousands of years ago.
Uh-huh. Well,
Just the shape was so unusual.
apparently the Incan people did declare them holy, but the Spanish wiped a lot of that out, unfortunately. They didn't know about Machu Picchu. Apparently, Machu Picchu hadn't been inhabited as much when the Spanish conquered Cusco. It was pretty bloody there. We didn't get much time on this past trip to visit Cusco, there's a lot of things around Cusco as well.
That would have been interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Cusco is actually a higher elevation than Machu Picchu. It's like 2,500 feet higher, or about 1,000 meters higher.
Okay.
So
I
it's
didn't feel like that because we were in trains and buses. So it seemed from Cusco we drove up towards Machu Picchu, but maybe I'm wrong on that one.
yeah, the train that we took was going downhill along that rushing rapid river.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but do you want to talk about any plans or anything in particular that you want to bring up to our audience?
Love to see you guys if I do make it to the States. And
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
yeah, that would be really nice. I must say, after that whole trip in South America, at the moment, I'm just kind of relaxing and unwinding. You
You
know,
were on the road a long time. How
Yeah.
long a trip was that for you?
it was just over 3 months. And it just takes some time for all that info to really settle in and become yours. Now it's just still all in the air a bit. And I have to settle into that.
For me, that was one of my longer trips as well. But it was just 23 days. I can't get away for 3 months from here at home. I gotta come back and take care of things. But it's good you've got people there. How is your pollinator business doing? Is that booming, or
Actually, the three guys that took care of it did very well. They kept it going. You never know what's going to happen if you're gone for 3 months. Maybe the business is bankrupt by the time you get back, but nothing like that. No, they're doing fine. Yeah.
thank goodness. Thank
Wow.
goodness.
Yeah.
You got the right team then.
Yeah, my son is the manager, and then there's one kid, man, he's been with the company for nearly 20 years. So he knows everything about it. And the other guy also, there's three of them, and they managed to keep it all happening.
So you manufacture them there in Amsterdam and ship from Amsterdam?
We get the washing machines and we get the bags made and they get sent to us. But the pollinators we assemble or manufacture ourselves in our own workshop. I'm a bit scared to send one off to China to ask them to make them.
Yeah, no, they like to take everything over, kind of monopolize, I think.
Yeah.
And China is so anti-cannabis, even though, the Chinese used to call their country the country of hemp and mulberry, because hemp is what most people wore, and the silkworms ate the mulberry tree. So until the Ming dynasty, when the Manchurians conquered China, they called their country the country of cannabis and mulberry. It was only when the Manchurians took over, they called it the Middle Kingdom, and that's about 500 years ago. I went to school in China for a couple of years, as you may know, and imported and sold hemp products for about a decade, way back when.
And I think also that they were making all their little blue suits under Mao's reign.
Yeah, those Mao suits were hemp.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. It's when I was there in the 80s and early 90s, they complained they thought hemp was old fashioned because they were switching to cotton and that it wrinkles too much. That was what I heard.
Okay.
But they're continuing on.
Yeah.
I don't guess anybody can go into China now with the.
Oh, I've got this whole COVID explosion.
Yeah. So before you became a cannabis activist, were you a feminist? Did you protest for women's rights in Holland? Or
I started off adult life in a home for unmarried mothers, so no time for protests and everything.
Okay, okay.
That's where Malus was born.
Uh,
And so I was a single mom right from the beginning.
I see. And so Malus, and you traveled all around India for 20 years, huh?
Yeah. Well, by then there was 4 of them.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So how old was Malus when you got back to Amsterdam? When you moved back?
Uh,
I was already here.
she got here before me. That's what she said.
Remember. Good, good.
I headed to the States when I turned 18 and started my own journeys, but
I see.
in 88, I was back here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. Well, that's a tobacco and hash joint there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So is there any specific kind of tobacco you use for your blend?
I like to use organic tobacco. And at the moment, I've still got a supply from the tobacco company in Brazil that we visited. And that gave us loads of rolling tobacco.
Sponsors for a
They were sponsors for the Dabadoo in Brazil.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on our show. What else can we talk about? Is there anything in particular you want to talk about? What about if someone wants to contact the Pollinator company? How will they do that?
info@pollinator.nl.
So that's the email. And so the website is Pollinator.nl.
Yeah.
What's the price range on the Pollinator machines?
Well, the cheapest little shaker is like about $15.
Uh-huh.
Just the P5000 is $2,500, $3,000. Yeah.
And how big is that one?
That holds like 11 pounds.
That's a lot. Is that one of the 10-foot long one?
No, that one's a prototype at the moment.
Yeah, that's still a prototype. We used to have it, and now they wanted to upgrade it, and they've been working on the prototype now for 1.5 years. So one day it'll be there again.
That's the infinity model.
Yeah.
But the what'd you call it? The P5000?
Yeah. It's for 5,000 grams, basically.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty good amount, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. About 12 pounds or something in terms of our old English weight.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate having you on the show here. Is there anything you'd like to tell our American audience before we go?
I dream of building a hemp bungalow for myself one day.
All right. So hempcrete and hemp wood.
Yeah.
I would like to do that too. I would like to do that too.
Yes, it's very complicated here in Holland. I found 2 pieces of land I liked, but then they have something, the Environmental Commission. And the Environmental Commission decided that all those houses had to be built of brick with pointy roofs. And no hemp bungalow with a flat roof. So I don't know, but one day I'll manage somewhere.
Here in America, they just have added hemp to the building code. It hasn't been, they've had to get variances every time that someone wanted to build a hempcrete building. They'd have to have the local authorities say, okay, we'll allow you to do this. And that's a whole bunch of bureaucracy. But
That's the problem over here, that they don't recognize it as an efficient building thing. I should look into that.
Here in the United States, just earlier this year, maybe 2 months ago, the building code draft that won't come out for a couple of years adds hempcrete to the standardized list of products. So maybe by 2024, 2025, people who are building here in America won't have to get that variance anymore. Hopefully it'll be the same way in Holland.
Yes, I'm going to look and see what the status is of hemp as a building material, whether that's accepted or whether they're not really giving the correct code that you can go ahead and use it.
Right.
It's interesting. That would be something to get into. And apart from that, to anyone that's listening, I hope you enjoyed it. And yes, I'll be coming to the States in May. And love you all and stay high.
Thanks. You know, I just remembered something we didn't talk about is we're both in this movie, The Green Goddess, which
yes.
You haven't really been able to see yet. Is that right?
No, because you can't get it over here somehow.
The Tubi link doesn't work there or something. I'll send Miluz a link. It's on this free channel.
But last time it said that it wasn't available in our area.
I know I saw it with Caroline and Gatto in Medellin when we ran it there. It seemed to work when we had it there. But I know Tubi does not go there. We're working to get it on Amazon right now. Amazon had a couple of complaints. So they said, "Oh, you have a URL. You got to take the URL off." And but you're like in the movie, you're one of those that they're searching for. They're looking for Mila, and they're searching across Amsterdam. There's some people that are no longer with us, like the cannabis poet there, and other people in those sequences. I hope you like it when you see it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hopefully it'll get out there some more.
Yeah. I can always walk up all the stairs all the way up to Soma's apartment, but that's a hell of a lot of stairs.
Oh, yeah, it's on the roof, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Soma also is in the movie. So a lot of it was filmed there in Amsterdam and mainly in Switzerland at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well,
great to see it again.
Yeah.
See the end of it. I've seen parts of it, but never the whole thing.
Well, you'll have a link where you'll be able to watch it in just a moment. I guarantee it.
Okay. Love you lots. Thank you.
Love you too. Thanks for coming on. I look forward to seeing you down the hash trail, and keep working to restore hemp.
Yeah, will do.
You've been talking to Mila Jansen in Amsterdam, the proprietor and founder of the Pollinator company, and known internationally as the Hash Queen. And she has a great book out there. Did you have a copy? Yeah, show them the Portuguese, or do you have an English one handy?
Yeah.
The Spanish.
That's the Spanish version.
We only have Spanish or Portuguese.
We don't have the English one here in my house at the moment.
Okay. But how you became the Hash Queen.
Yeah.
Now we know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Miluz. I appreciate it.
Wonderful to see you.